Felix McDermott was 82 years old at the time of his death at the VA hospital in Clarksburg in April 2018. A decorated career soldier, he retired with the U.S. Army rank of sergeant.
I mean, Dad had 20-plus years service. He was military through and through his whole life. Even after he retired, he got together with his Army buddies.
McDermott was in the VA hospital but was improving enough to be released to the VA nursing home. But before that could happen, he had a sudden, unexplained drop in his blood sugar and he died. Nearly 5 months later, his family received a shocking visit.
In the end of August, when the FBI showed up at my house. They're the ones that told me what was going on, that they had a person of interest, and that they wanted to exhume Dad and see if he was part of this.
The feds were suspicious because McDermott and several other victims died of insulin overdoses. They were given shots by a hospital employee even though they were not diabetic. And it gets worse. That female employee, who was fired and is now the person of interest, did not have the medical certification she claimed. Well, you went from thinking your father had died of natural causes to him possibly being murdered. It's a homicide.
And that's heartbreaking. There's no other way to explain that. That's totally heartbreaking to find that out. I'm very angry. There's no other word for that. I'm very angry.
Proctor is fully cooperating with investigators and is telling her dad's story to the press. She says he'd want her to pursue justice for him.
Knowing my dad, he's sitting up there looking down saying, get him, you know, make somebody pay for this, you know.
She wants the person of interest arrested, prosecuted, and imprisoned. Every family member, lawyer, or politician I've spoken to says pretty much the same thing, that big changes need to happen here at the VA so this never happens again, and it must be done in the memory of Sergeant Felix McDermott and all the other veterans who died here under these circumstances. At the VA hospital in Clarksburg, I'm Mort Curtis, 13 News, working for you.
You start to feel a sense of anger and frustration, you know, how did this happen?
On April 9, 2018, 82-year-old retired Army Sergeant Felix McDermott died at the Lewis A. Johnson VA Medical Center in Clarksburg. But it's how he died that is raising red flags.
What happened was someone, you know, was allowed access to our veterans and did something really bad and killed them, you know.
Months after his death, McDermott's body was exhumed by inspectors with the Department of Veterans Affairs. The autopsy revealed the non-diabetic had been injected with insulin and died from hypoglycemia. His death is now labeled a homicide.
When someone basically was willing to sacrifice their life, and then we found out that their life was taken in such a horrific fashion, it's hard for us to imagine that, especially as a family member.
A claim filed by McDermott's family over his death lists a series of ways the VA was negligent, including knowing 9 to 10 other patients died under similar circumstances before McDermott was even admitted.
We did not know that there was a homicide that was connected with this activity way back when, a horrible tragedy, or how many others might have been affected.
Senator Manchin is insisting on accountability.
Now what we're doing is we're pushing the Inspector General to wrap it up. If you're coming to a conclusion, wrap it up so that we can give confidence and closure to everybody.
Senator Manchin, who's part of the Veterans Affairs Committee, says if that report does not give those families closure, it could warrant a U.S. Senate investigation.
It will if we don't have closure. If we don't have the facts to say this happened this way, boom, boom, boom.
Until answers are found, James McCormick wants veterans out there to continue to receive care from the VA and not let this tragedy scare them away.
For me, as a representative of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, as the National Junior Vice Commander, I can tell you that I will take a personal interest in making sure that anything that we can do to help correct this, that we will do.
Reporting in Charleston, I'm Adrienne Robbins, 13 News, working for you.
Air Force veteran George Nelson Shaw Sr. is now the second person to die at the VA hospital in Clarksburg, whose death is being considered a homicide. Shaw was 81 when he passed away April of 2018. His case follows that of Army Sergeant Felix Kirk McDermott, age 82, who also died the same month. Authorities say both men died after being injected with insulin, though neither was a diabetic. We combed the obituaries from the Clarksburg region from 2018 and found at least 8 other veterans' deaths which match the age and fall within the time period the VA Inspector General has been looking at. No one will confirm if they are on the list of 10 suspicious deaths. The state's 2 U.S. senators want answers.
Everything must be done to make sure that these veterans in our country, but the veterans in the state of West Virginia, and most importantly, the veterans at the Clarksburg VA, know that it's secured and safe. I want to make sure that. I want to get those answers.
The state's entire congressional delegation wants to see just what's in the Inspector General's report, a report which the IG began investigating more than a year ago.
But it's just heartbreaking to think our veterans were subjected and their families to something like this. And we've got to get to the bottom of it.
The VA has not returned our calls for comment. People monitoring this case continue to say there is a person of interest that's being looked at in the investigation. Still, no one has been arrested or charged with any crimes. At the federal courthouse in downtown Charleston, Mark Curtis, 13 News, working for you.
We have a 92-year-old Navy veteran who was very healthy for a 92-year-old man who had his mental faculties, was pretty healthy.
Russell Posey then developed pneumonia and was taken to the Clarksburg VA Medical Center's ICU.
He made a dramatic turnaround. He was sitting up in his bed, eating, talking with his family normally, and they transferred him to 3A because he was doing so well.
We now know that transfer may have been a death sentence for the 92-year-old. 3A is the floor where the person of interest in this case worked. The floor where 9 other suspicious deaths occurred. And like the other deaths, the non-diabetic experienced a quick drop in his glucose levels.
His body didn't get enough oxygen. He ended up having a heart attack. The man actually lived for about 11 days, which is a testament to how strong this 92-year-old man was, even with someone overdosing him on insulin.
Posey now joins 5 other veterans who have been identified and died under suspicious circumstances at the VA in Clarksburg. 3 have been reclassified as homicides, including the first, Felix Kirk McDermott, whose daughter continues to fight for justice.
I feel for every one of those families. None of us should have had to have gone through this. This is just totally heartbreaking for us all.
The person of interest in this case no longer works at the VA, but is yet to be charged. Both the FBI and the VA Inspector General are investigating.
I want to see the VA held accountable, and I want to see the person of interest behind bars.
Reporting in Charleston, I'm Adrienne Robbins, 13 News, working for you.
Chairman Pappas, Ranking Member.
It was a mixture of anger and shock as Congress officially launched its investigation of problems with the Veterans Administration nationwide. West Virginia topping the list after several suspicious deaths of veterans at the VA Medical Center in Clarksburg and the investigation into charges of sexual assault on patients at the VA in Beckley.
The deaths of Lewis A. Johnson VA Medical Center in Clarksburg, West Virginia, and the sexual assault allegations in Beckley, West Virginia, VA Medical Center, are not only troubling, but they are unacceptable.
Several veterans died in Clarksburg after being injected with insulin they did not need. 3 of those cases are now considered homicides, but victims' families were not notified by the VA.
So what actions, if any, has VA taken to inform veterans or their next of kin who may have suffered unexplained hypoglycemic events or even death at the Clarksburg VMAC?
So we have not reached out to anyone, as this is an active investigation.
Members of Congress are also concerned about reports that insulin and other medicines were left out in the open at the VA in Clarksburg instead of being locked up.
It's just unconscionable, some of the rumors of the practices. We need to see the full report before we can say exactly what's gone on. We need to do the investigations.
While a person of interest is being looked at in the 3 Clarksburg homicides, no arrests have been made. This may be the first congressional hearing about the VA deaths in Clarksburg, but it won't be the last. Congress is trying to walk a fine line between not interfering with the criminal investigation, but trying to get to the bottom of failed medical practices and procedures in the VA system. At the federal courthouse in Charleston, Mark Curtis, 13 News, working for you. The woman who is considered a person of interest in these wrongful death cases was terminated for the VA for providing false information on her job application. She was thought to be a CNA or certified nursing assistant, but a check of the state agency that regulates those licenses does not turn up her name. Several of the veterans who died were injected with insulin, even though they were not diabetic.
She absolutely was doing blood sugar tests on patients because we have the medical records that show that she was doing that.
And that would be improper?
She's not a nursing assistant. She's not a certified nursing assistant. So as far as we know, she hasn't had any medical training whatsoever.
We are not publicly naming the person of interest since she has not been charged, but we are getting reaction to Senator Joe Manchin's recent call that she be charged soon.
But the bottom line is enough is enough. The woman, the person who's they say is a woman, her name's been out in the media. And this is ridiculous. There's not been any indictments. There's not been anybody that's been basically charged at all with this. And it's ridiculous.
But the attorney representing several families involved in the federal investigation wonders if there will be a plea bargain offered by the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District, Bill Powell.
I'm sure the families would love to have some resolution like that. They would like to see an arrest, I'm sure. I'm kind of curious as to whether Bill Powell might be working on some type of plea agreement or something, and maybe we'll get a quick resolution when it finally happens.
The attorney also says high-level staffers at the VA need to be fired for their lack of immediate action when these deaths occurred. Aside from the criminal investigation, lawyers for the victims' families in this case want a thorough review of medical policies and procedures at the VA that may have been overlooked or intentionally ignored. At the federal courthouse in Charleston, I'm Mark Curtis, 13 News, working for you. In July 2018, a 92-year-old veteran of the U.S. Navy who served in World War II died at the VA. He was given unnecessary insulin shots and his blood sugar plummeted, causing a fatal heart attack. The victim's family does not wish to be publicly identified at this time, but we do know he was being treated on floor 3A where all the other suspicious deaths occurred.
This is exactly the pattern. You have someone who's not on their deathbed, who appears to be getting better, and then all of a sudden have a medically unexplained severe hypoglycemic event that ends up causing their death.
We now have confirmed 10 suspicious deaths. 5 of the victims are publicly identified and 3 have been ruled homicides. Attorney O'Dell is also taking issue with recent statements made to our Clarksburg newsroom by a VA official who says the ex-employee, who is now a person of interest in this case, was dealt with quickly.
That employee was immediately removed from care, and it was turned over to the justice authorities, and we're anxious for justice to be served. We delivered the accountability that we should have.
This VA made a lot of mistakes, and if they want to correct them, they need to be honest with the public, talk about those mistakes, and talk about what they've done to correct them.
The VA says it is now keeping insulin in a secured place. That's instead of leaving it out on open medical carts where it could be improperly accessed, which is suspected in these deaths. It is widely anticipated that criminal charges will be filed in this case. The big question is, when? At the U.S. Veterans Memorial on the Capitol grounds in Charleston, Mark Curtis, 13 News, working for you. When 92-year-old World War II veteran Russell Posey died at the VA hospital in Clarksburg in July 2018, it was his death that finally triggered the federal investigation into 9 previous similar deaths.
Although Mr. Posey was the last chronologically that we're aware of to die due to a hypoglycemic insulin injection, he was the first autopsy that we're aware of.
His identification was released earlier this week. As of now, there are a total of 10 suspicious deaths being investigated at the VA Medical Center. 6 of the victims have been publicly identified by family members, and so far 3 cases have been ruled homicides. While Russell Posey's autopsy lists his cause of death as undetermined, federal prosecutors could file a murder charge.
I believe the government already considers Mr. Posey's case to be a homicide, and we certainly do.
Posey's family members report they met and spoke with the person of interest in this case. They say she expressed surprise Mr. Posey was still alive days after an insulin shot made him ill.
It is eerie and creepy that the person who appears to have been doing this was actually interacting with these families while they were, concerned about their loved one dying.
That person of interest has since been fired from the VA but has not been charged with any crime.
This has gone on way too long for these families to find out what's happened, and now we have another family that's grieving in a different way. It's sickening is what it is.
In most cases, the veteran's health was improving and they were scheduled for release when the fatal insulin dose was administered. While everyone is awaiting criminal charges to be filed in this case, the civil lawsuits alleging malpractice and negligence on the part of the VA will be moving forward. At the state capitol in Charleston, I'm Mark Curtis, 13 News, working for you.
What we've seen in Clarksburg has been not just alarming, but shameful.
After nearly 10 suspicious deaths, 3 of them homicides at the Clarksburg VA Medical Center, West Virginia's 2 U.S. senators are demanding more transparency.
What Senator Manchin and I want to do is fill out the whole picture for the rest of the VA to say these are protocols that failed. These are protocols that have been in place for years that are antiquated, however we might find that to be.
The bipartisan bill will require the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to send detailed reports on patient safety at medical centers, as well as a full report on the events that led to several veterans dying in Clarksburg. With the federal probe into the deaths now 18 months along, an attorney for many of the victims says the legislation is a start, but
I don't think these families should have to wait for legislation to pass 2 houses of Congress and then get implemented and down the road at some point.
Odell says the bill is needed, but when it comes to healing for the families, it'll take more than legislation.
They're going to pass a bill, they're glad about it, but they don't know exactly what that's going to entail, how it's going to fix things. They know what happened, and they want someone to be held accountable. They want an apology.
An investigation into these deaths is ongoing, but so far, no criminal charges have been filed. Reporting in Charleston, I'm Adrienne Robbins, 13 News, working for you.